Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today I'm going to be discussing Boosh. Saevus Corax deals with the dead. This is book one of the brand new trilogy that is coming out in this last 3 months of the year, the Saevus Corax trilogy. And I had a chance to read an arc, but I did not have a chance to actually get a video review out. I did put a review out on Goodreads and Netgalley, as well as for the next two, but this is going to be my video review where I discuss it in depth and tell you whether or not you should read it. It's KJ Parker, so yes. And is it a good starting point? It depends. We're going to talk a lot about that. And I'm not going to discuss whether or not what is going on and why a trilogy is being released. One book in October, one in November, one in December. That's weird. Like, I didn't know books did that, but, you know, KJ Parker is a rah-rah-awis. So, without wasting any more time, let's get down to business. Let us discuss Saevus Corax deals with the dead. First of all, the font in here is really cool. You can't see it from back here, but it's got a decent font. Let's talk about right now before someone goes in the comments and says, why do you pronounce it like that? So, as you can see, Saevus Corax deals with the dead. Look at that. So, most people, would you focus on that, please? Come on, camera. You focus on crap. There you go. So, S-A-E-V-U-S. People are going to pronounce that however they want. Some people are going to say Saevus. Some are going to say Saevus. Some are going to say Saevus. Whatever. It's Saevus Corax. It's a Latin word. Saevus means savage in Latin, and Corax has to do with crows. So, in Latin it's Saevus. That's how you pronounce it. The V is pronounced like a W, so that's how I'm going to pronounce it. I have tried to say Saevus or Saevus. I can't, guys. So just deal. You can pronounce it however you want, but I'm going to say Saevus Corax. This trilogy is actually the first trilogy that I have read by KJ Parker. If you've been following my channel for any period of time, you know that KJ Parker is one of my favorite authors of all time, hands down, no problem. But I've only read his 4 standalone novels, and that is The Folding Knife, The Company, The Hammer, Sharps, and there are 5 standalone novels, Savages. All of which are in my top favorite of KJ Parker books, except for Sharps, which I don't like quite as much. And I have also read every single one of KJ Parker's novellas and short stories. So the 3 novella/short story collections as well, which is Academic Exercises, Father of Lies, and the most recent one, Under My Skin. So I have read all of KJ Parker's short fiction and all of his standalones, but never any of his trilogies. He has 4 trilogies: the Fencer trilogy, which was his first one, the Scavenger trilogy, the Two of Swords trilogy, and the Siege trilogy. And then this, the Saevus Corax trilogy, would make 5. And so this is the first trilogy that I've read by him. Everything that he has written has wrapped up in a single book. Now, there are some characters that are in different books, like Salinus is the main focus of 3 separate books, but they're not really direct continuations or whatever. They're in no way, like, you can read them all as standalones. And you can kind of do that here with Saevus Corax as well. In fact, I would argue that you could actually read either of the first 2 first, because it doesn't actually reference a ton. You do need to read the first 2 before you read the third one. But they do tell a complete arc of the story of this man who goes by the name Saevus Corax. Saevus Corax is, the name deals with the dead, it has more than one name. It's not just the obvious, which is Saevus Corax owns a battlefield salvage company. And what it means is that he pays both sides of a conflict. When there's an impending conflict, he outbids, like, they're like contractors, and they bid on both sides of the conflict, so that no matter who wins, you know, you're not, like, fighting over it, but they get to go have claim to the battlefield salvage. So stripping the dead of gear, which they then fix and resell, and you learn about all the different types of boots, all the different types of armor, all the different types of weapons, and also, you know, collecting valuables off there or whatever. And they also clean the battlefield, so you learn about, like, how to dispose of bodies, how, you know, you burn them or whatever to, you know, how the best way to cleanse a battlefield, so it's not just a bunch of, like, you know, dead people sitting there rotting, spreading disease. So theirs is a public service, if you will, and you will learn all about that. As if you are not aware, every KJ Parker focuses heavily on some kind of logistical issue. Folding Knife focuses on banking and economics of a city. The Hammer focuses on manufacturing and construction and starting a factory. The company focuses on what it takes to create a colony on a previously deserted island. All of the inner workings of that. This goes into all kinds of logistical things on how to fix a battlefield, how to resell, and really how to run a small business. And from the beginning, Saevus Corax makes it very clear that this is his story. He is telling you this story. It's hard to tell if he's telling it afterwards. I think he's just kind of telling it as it's going, like we're viewing the events as they're happening, like he's our narrator for what's going on. It's not like a frame narrative where he's writing about this later. So he's not like, oh, if only I had known what would happen next. No, it's not like that. It's more like he's just the one guiding us through the events, and if there's not an important event, he doesn't really tell us, and he'll brush over whatever he feels the need to do. Now, what I want to say up front about this is I think your level of enjoyment of this book is going to depend on a lot of things. First of all, Parker is not for everybody just to start with, because his style doesn't vibe with everybody, and the way he goes into stuff doesn't jive with everybody, and the fact that the weird documentary kind of like narrative style and really sometimes academic prose, while still hilarious and cynical and sad, is not everybody's favorite thing. But there's a lot that's familiar here. So if you are a fan, if you've read a few of Parker's things and you're a fan of his style and the way he does things, I think there's a lot to enjoy here in Saevus Corax that you may like a whole lot. If you've never dealt with Parker's stuff before, it's possible that this might be a little too much. I hear the Siege trilogy, again, I have not read it. The 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City is a really good starting point, or many of his novellas. However, if you've read a lot of Parker, a lot of this is going to be familiar, especially his short works and first-person works. If you've heard me talk about this book at all, just on my streams or whatever, I am a fan of Parker's third-person works, and that's his standalones, basically. And the Engineering trilogy, of which I'm in the first book right now, is also third-person, and I already like it a ton. I like Parker's third-person work a lot, because his first-person work tends to the characters are very similar, the lead characters. My Beautiful Life is a notable exception to the similar main character we have in a Parker story, a first person Parker story. It's always very, very intelligent, almost like clever, almost to the point of smarmy. If they have any money, they will lose it immediately and spend the rest of the time trying to make some or run from the people who took it. If you've read the Salenninus books, Saevus Corax a lot in here feels like Salenninus. The Salenninus books, Blue and Gold, The Devil You Know, and Big Score, the Salenninus in that book feels very different from the prolific Saturninus that is mentioned in every other book. He is the Shakespeare and the Plato and the Socrates and the Pythagoras and the Thomas Paine. Basically, any work of literature or economics or philosophy or theater was written by Salenninus in K.J. Parker's world. But the Salenninus we get is significantly less, mythical than that. And so Saevus Corax feels a lot like Salenninus here, where he's constantly running from one crisis to another, and then is caught, and then somehow escapes, and then goes to the new crisis. And that, in Parker's novellas, is not my favorite thing. I much prefer when they're in one place trying to solve a problem, like in The Hammer, or The Folding Knife, or The Company. Like, his third-person works, I like that significantly better. So we have this smarmy, like, too smart for their own good, yet is their own worst enemy character here. And a lot, and I'm just putting, like, the negatives up front. It's a KJ Parker book. I really, really liked it. I'm coming to the good stuff later. We're gonna take our medicine to start with. And if you've read a ton of Parker's works, we also have, other characters that are very familiar in Parker's work. We have the unknown woman. We come onto a scene, and there's a woman, and the only thing she says is,
"You again?"
Tell me you haven't seen that. There's an unknown guy. Come onto a scene, and there's an unknown guy who knows our protagonist, we don't know his name, just says, "What do you want?" Again, we've seen that a lot. And then there's the random unknown person that we come that we come into the scene, and without introduction, they just say, "Of course it's you." These are three character types and character introductions that Parker uses a lot in his novellas, and we have it here in Saevus Corax. Now, the female character Staurakia is more substantial than a lot of Parker's female characters in these other works. Normally they are just kind of here at plot points to kind of bounce across, but because of the nature of this being a full novel and of Staurakia being present much of the time, that she has more to do. She is still the standard Parker female, but she's also much more able to like kind of take care of herself and stick up for herself, and is not just either incredibly cruel and tyrannical or completely smitten by our protagonist. So those are really all my negatives, is that it just feels very familiar if you've read a lot of Parker's works. Now, this doesn't make it bad, because a familiar Parker book is better than much of the other stuff I read. I just tear through these books. Just whenever I do Parker reviews, I end up reading a lot of quotes, because Parker is just such a brilliant writer, and it's really hard to kind of sell what's going on. There is more plot and action in this book than we typically find in a Parker book. Again, I have not read any of his other trilogies, so maybe that's different elsewhere. And I won't read all of the quotes, but I will kind of whet your whistle. Just starting with the opening paragraph, where it's just this brilliant observation about lying. The opening paragraph of the book. Lying is like farming, or draining marshland, or terracing a hillside, or planting a grove of peach trees. It's an attempt to control your environment and make it better. A convincing lie improves on bleak, bare fact in the same way human beings improve a wilderness so they can bear to live there. In comparison, truth is a desert. You need to plant it with your imagination and water it with narrative skill until it blossoms and bears nourishing fruit. In the sand and gravel of what actually happened, I grow truths of my own. Not just different truths, better ones. Practically every time I open my mouth, I improve the world, making it not how it is, but as it should be. And again, that's just a sample of Parker's narrative style. Just he describes things in such a different way that I would never think to describe things. And so Saevus he's been a battlefield salvage collector for a long enough time to where he has like these CSI ways of piecing together what happens. He always shows up after the battle, because if you show up too early, you put your guys in danger. So he shows up after the battle is over and is able to kind of piece together what happened based on his just experience of what battlefields look like. And because of the nature of the constant being on the battlefield and dealing with the aftermath of battles and war, this book has a lot to say about war, about its causes, about its purpose, about its function, about how war can be the absolute worst, the worst thing that could possibly occur, but also how it can be a positive thing depending on where you are and what side you're on. In fact, there are two brilliant, huge paragraphs near the end of the book where he talks about both of these things in incredible detail. I am not going to read them to you. You should experience them for yourself. It's mind-blowing the way he can describe both of those things. Saevus talks about how war is more often lost by the loser than won by the winner. He actually he does not like the term grave robber, which is what a bunch of people call him in his business. He prefers battlefield salvager. And because of the discussion about war, there's just a lot about geopolitics in this, and that's actually my favorite stuff. When Parker stops and discusses the geopolitics of everything, I like that actually better than the plot in here. The plot is hard to describe. It kind of like all of these books, really, all three of these books in this trilogy kind of have multiple plots going on. About halfway through, the kind of plot changes and becomes something else. But from the very beginning, we see that Saevus is a guy trying to do the right thing, but as in many Parker books, no good deed goes unpunished. And by trying to do the right thing, you have not done the best thing. Like, the best thing for you and your situation would be to do this other thing, but it's not necessarily the right thing because it involves having to get your hands dirty or doing something that, is morally reprehensible, but it is better off, like, you and yours would be safer if you had done this thing, but you don't. And that happens all the time in Parker's books, and it always turns out badly, as it does here. Parker's documentary, like Ken Burns' narrative style, again, if you've read The Folding Knife, there's that chapter about the heist that is just, it's as if freaking David Attenborough is just narrating it. And you would expect, because of it's a heist, because it's a high kind of octane kind of plot, that you would expect it to be, focused on all the aspects. That's not important. It's always the rippling effects in Parker that become the big deal. And so you have catastrophes that happen in a single paragraph in Saevus Corax, as in Parker's other works. You have murders, deaths, these horrible things that happen just like that and are over. And we don't focus on the events themselves, but how the consequences ripple outwards. And this is what Parker's just brilliant. Like, Parker is you cannot read a Parker book and not understand how intelligent this man is. His grasp of geopolitics and global economies and like, is there anything he doesn't know the inner workings of? He has these incredibly detailed discussions about geopolitics, how competition for the same natural resources can just have catastrophic effects for not only the people competing for that resource, but effects that just, boom, explode outward and affect neighboring countries that don't even have a dog in the fight. How these massive wars, and this is something that's never discussed. Oftentimes there is discussion about consequences of war in fantasy books, but there's almost never discussion about the economic effects of war. The good economic effects, the jobs that are created, the money that is created by going to war, but also the devastating economic consequences of war. How it taps out countries, about how if you happen to lose and you don't get control of that resource, well, guess what? The entire economy of your government collapses. About how a lot of these foreign powers are propped up by these international banks that basically, hold everyone's money and are really the powers behind the international governments that move, because they're the ones that fund everything, and they're the ones that make the bets, and people put their money in there and it's just investing in everything. Their hands are in all these pies, to where they're kind of like the superpowers. Like, they're so powerful they have their own military forces that are actually stronger than these government military forces. I've never seen banks themselves be villainous than as much as in this book, as in Saevus Corax deals with the dead. We've got this idea that, and this is applicable to our lives, the idea that the higher-ups always make mistakes. Like, the higher-ups make mistakes based on either, one, they don't care and are just corrupt and couldn't give a crap, but even the helpful ones, the ones that want to be helpful, make these enormous mistakes because they assume that the people at the bottom are the same as they are. They have the same wants, they have the same needs, they have the same fears, the same insecurities, that they're the same. That and this happens with my buddy Finn and I. It's different than it used to be, but my best friend Finn has always, had been more economically stable than I am. But even now, like, our houses are not worth the same. Our benefits at our job are not worth the same. We are not in the same tax bracket, he and I. And so it is difficult sometimes for him to empathize with the struggles of the lower middle class, because that is not where he lives. And it's not like Finn is an incredibly caring and wonderful person, but if you don't live down there, it's hard to kind of empathize with that kind of stuff. And we have that here, and not just on the micro level, but on the macro level as well. How governments of countries assume that cities or towns have the same desires and the same kind of government and the same problems, that they act the same way that countries do. And a lot of this misconception, Saevus has to use to his advantage on people thinking one thing, and he has to kind of, they think he's going to zig, and he zags instead. And in war, there is this idea of sides, like, whose side are you on, what sides are against each other and will always will be, what sides can ally in order to go against this other side, how can you play the different sides against each other. And in the KJ Parker book, there are way too many sides. And so how can these different sides be negotiated? Saevus always talks about he has these three plates that are spinning, that are always spinning above these scales, and he's got to keep these scales balanced, keeping these three things just in motion. And everything he does, he tries to deal with one of them and not make one of them, tip the scales in either direction. He calls any sticky situation he gets in doing the geometry, where he like plays with angles of things on, how to escape, and it's basically his way of Sherlocking his way out of a situation. But really, at its core, Saevus Corax is a story about a guy searching for a life that is his, searching for an identity that doesn't belong to anybody else, that doesn't belong to his family, his company, to destiny, but a life that he can live that is truly his own. The desire to be your own boss, be a master of your own fate, to have a life that you control, that is beholden to no one but what you want for your life. And what would you give? How far would you go in order to have a life that is truly your own, that is not ruled by any of these other outside forces? And the horrifically cynical idea that people can only be happy if everyone, like life only works if everybody plays by the rules except you. Because then you can do what you want, but everyone else is playing by this set of rules, but you can break them because that'll make you happy. And good luck. So all in all, Saevus Corax is more of what you expect from KJ Parker. It reads really quickly. It is kind of a globe-trotting. There are more locations in this one than in other Parker stuff that I've read. I really, really enjoyed it. And even talking about Saevus Corax Deals with the Dead makes me like it more. I think I need to read it again. I don't know maybe I was still in my slump when I read it. I did enjoy books 2 and 3 more. I'm not going to spoil the other 2 books, but you should definitely read them. I like them more than this one because there's a little less globetrotting running around, people chasing you, that kind of thing. And the ending of this trilogy is like I'm still kind of thinking about it. It was very, you can't talk about endings, but it was poignant. It was stuff happened in book 3. Stuff happened that I did not expect. And having read a whole bunch of Parker books, I was so pleased that many things happened that I was not expecting, or if they did, I was expecting reversals, and I'm just like, oh, wait, what? Like, really, really good. Like the series is better, I think, than each individual one of the books are, despite the books being excellent. I gave this book 4 stars. Thinking back, I probably give the whole series 5 stars. I would raise this book up to a 4.5, which is basically what I gave the other 2 as well. I really do need to reread this one. I want to close out with some more quotes, some incredible stuff that Parker talks about, starting with a description of one of his friends. It's hard to imagine anybody genuinely needing Ekahard for any purpose under any circumstances. At his very best, he's mildly decorative and moderately entertaining, and his very best comes along about as often as total eclipses of the sun. If you're patient, he can be trained to perform simple tasks, and that's about it. That's so mean! This is what Saevus calls nuanced democracy. That made 8 against and 1 in favor, so I exercised my casting vote and the motion was carried. I call it nuanced democracy, just like the traditional version, only better. I agree. I concur. And of course, the idea of preemptive self-defense. We've all heard this one before. Preemptive self-defense, the idea that your life is worth more than somebody else's, which justifies taking extreme action. Indeed. And then, for all of us bookworms out there, go away and leave me in peace. Why is it every time I open a book, people for miles around interpret it as a desperate plea for conversation? Why? Why is that? Why is that? That's a universal truth. Anyway, guys, this is an excellent place to start, though there is a lot of globe-trotting. There is more of a plot that's in this one, and by plot, I mean, there's less standing around and moving pieces on a chessboard and people doing nothing. There is a lot of movement in this particular one. I want to thank KJ Parker, Orbit, and Netgalley for the advanced copies of this great series. You should check it out and then read the other ones. Guys, that's all from me for today. Have you read this? Have you read any KJ Parker? Are you going to start with this one and be part of the early conversation? Thanks for watching, guys. And as always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description, and I'll see you next time, guys.